You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I'm Dustin and Tony is with me, and we are here to cover everything from August 26th through September 1st. We have a bunch of news, but it's actually been a slightly lighter than usual week, but we do have some stuff to discuss. We do have a couple of different things, more overarching, all streaming services in general type of discussions later on. So let's get into the news. Starting off with Netflix. Netflix is adapting the Noel Diary novel into a feature film. There is a Once Upon a Time in Cholon has been announced for Netflix. There's a dramedy series called Made, which is moving forward. There's a Resident Evil series, which is coming to Netflix. Netflix is also continuing their push for non-scripted originals. They said they're specifically looking for more game shows and reality-type shows, specifically dating. I've said this before. The dating stuff has been really big. I think it probably surprised some people within Netflix about how big this stuff is. But I think the dating shows in general do very well. You look at reality shows in general, but you look at shows like Big Brother or Survivor or The Bachelor or even Dancing with the Stars. Those are all on broadcast television. They all do relatively well because they've been doing multiple seasons. In some cases, there's 3 different seasons per year because of how the shows are formatted, where they can continuously put out new ones and new ones and new ones and new ones, and people keep tuning in. These shows, they are not losing popularity. So Netflix, the real one advantage that they have over broadcast is that in most cases, they release all of their stuff in a binge format where you can watch it all. And that's the stuff that gets people really talking. The last couple shows that they had, Too Hot to Handle, they had The Circle earlier this year. These are shows that did really, really well for Netflix and probably, like I said, surprised some people within Netflix about how well this type of content could actually be. But also, the idea of this content, as I've said before, this content is very inexpensive to produce, so it makes sense to try to make content that is not going to be very expensive and that's going to get a lot of eyeballs on it on a normal basis. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're looking at so much more unscripted originals to add to their slate.
Yeah, if I can recall, I feel like you nailed this on the head a while back of how Netflix has found a hidden gem in content of unscripted television and how much of unscripted television there is and how big of a hit it is with people. Talked about the dating shows, the singing shows, any of the American Ninja Warrior challenges. There's just a lot of content out there that gets eyeballs and that gets people involved. And this is a great move. Glad to see that Netflix is diving more into this.
The other part of the Netflix news is that Netflix has announced that they are offering select originals for free. They actually have a collection of content, including Bird Box, The Two Popes, a bunch of other stuff that they're actually offering for free for people to check out. It's Netflix's way of marketing their service and saying, hey, look what kind of content we have for those of you who aren't already subscribing. I think, as we've discussed before, Netflix is kind of plateaued with the amount of subscribers that will actually subscribe, at least here in the United States. So it's very unlikely that this is going to garner any more additional subscribers, but I can see why they would do it because there's the opportunity. Also, some of these films, the majority of people who already subscribe to the service have probably already seen these, so it's a chance to get that content out there to other people who maybe weren't already subscribing to the service and say, hey, look, we have content like this on a consistent basis. Come over and subscribe to us. But like I said, I don't think it's gonna gain any large number of subscribers. It's just really a marketing move.
For me, I'm a little bit confused of why now. They are the dominant leader in the space, at least in the U.S. domestic market and even internationally. There is no close second right now. And so for me, this move just seems a little bit weird because they've never really been one to do this. And I looked at the originals that they have for free, and some of them are pretty compelling of why I would check that out. I remember Bird Box I saw Bird Box. But I remember if I'm imagining myself as somebody else, it's Bird Box got big. I remember that blew up all over the internet. There was all those different Bird Box challenges that were pretty ridiculous and got people hurt. When They See Us is also a show that's that's being offered, which that's a great show by Ava DuVernay, and it's really important for our time. But there's some other decent pieces of content there, but I feel like overall it's I don't understand the point. I don't think it's going to really gain that many subscribers from it. I doubt there's many people who are really going to check it out anyway. So my question is just like, why now? I feel like this would be a great move if they were like first starting off the originals, their Netflix originals and that side of the business, getting out of content licensing and just distributing other people's content and then delivering their own. I could see how that would be a good marketing ploy, but right now it's just what's the reasoning behind it? It just seems kind of pointless and a waste of money when you're the dominant leader to do something like this. I don't know. It doesn't something feels off about this.
Yeah, it also seems like a weird time because the other time that this could have worked would have been at the very beginning of the pandemic when a lot of services were offering free content or offering free, like longer free trials and things like that.
Agreed. Yeah.
But, that wasn't the case then either. So, oh well. All right, Prime Video. Sci-fi adaptation of Consider Phlebas has been canceled at Prime Video. This was a project that actually was going to be a pretty big project, and it's surprising that it's been canceled, but Amazon's just determined that this is not the right time to move forward with that. Amazon UK has ordered the musical drama Jungle. Amazon has also picked up a new dating and reality series, and then they are also working on an adaptation of Felix Ever After. We have nothing for Hulu, CBS All Access. There's a drama series called 24/7 that is in the works. And then there is a new comedy also in the works, which is called The Multiverse. And then jumping over to Apple TV Plus, Apple has set 3 new documentary series that are coming in the months of October, November, December. And these are in the vein of like the BBC Earth stuff, but also National Geographic and a variety of other Earth-type documentaries that are out there. But personally, I love content like this, and it's nice to see more of this stuff coming. If you remember, there was that Elephant Queen documentary that actually, it was a documentary, not a series, but it was a documentary that started at the very beginning, that launched with the launch of Apple TV Plus. And it, I can't sit here and say it did extremely well or not, but it's nice to see that there's a variety of content outside of just comedy and drama. I love to see documentaries. The one thing I really enjoy about Netflix is their documentary series and things like that. Learning something new about something I would not have otherwise known, but giving having the budgets from the streaming service to give these different ideas and things of importance a platform to showcase what you should know.
Yeah, I feel Netflix has definitely been the king of documentaries, and that's how they've garnered a lot of buzz, is from some of them. I mean, Tiger King is basically a documentary, and that blew up the internet. For me, I see a little bit of a larger trend. You have, Disney Plus with their National Geographic channel that's on the Disney Plus platform. You also have Hulu, which just made that deal with IMAX to distribute the different IMAX content, the documentaries there, the nature documentaries. And now you have this deal at Apple TV Plus where they're doing these documentaries where like two out of the 3 seem very nature driven. And it's there's always been a big push for documentaries, and many platforms have had documentaries for a while, but the nature part of it is interesting because it seems like now there's like not like a super arms race. I feel like that's a little bit too provocative of a term, but it seems now that there is definitely more trend to have more nature related content on these streaming services. And it's interesting seeing how like Disney with National Geographic and then Hulu with IMAX kind of did that first, and then now Apple TV is making this move. For me, what was interesting to see is how you have sometimes these executives that claim that we don't look at to our partners, we don't look at to our competitors, and we're not influenced by what they do, but clearly they are. They're seeing this trend in the business, and they're trying to copy these moves and stuff. So for me, that's kind of what I got out of this article, is the little bit of the bigger picture and stepping back and seeing now like a new tiny pattern happening. I'm curious to see what Netflix is going to do, what HBO Max, what Peacock, what some of these other people are going to do, and how it's going to move forward.
Moving ahead, we don't have anything for Disney Plus, but Mulan is coming out this week. While that's not necessarily something news, because we've already talked about the release of Mulan and how it's the premiere access as part of Disney Plus and things like that. One of the things that will be interesting is to see how actually successful it can be. If Mulan is trending when it comes out, naturally trending, not because of a promoted trending situation, but if Mulan is trending, if lots of people are actually checking it out. Obviously, Disney, in general, streaming numbers are not something that a lot of the companies divulge because they don't need to. But if it does do very well, obviously, Disney will probably go out there and try to brag about how well it does. We both are planning on taking a look at Mulan as it releases, and hopefully we'll both see it before next episode and we'll be able to talk about it. Specifically, not so much a review of the film itself, but the ability and the ease of using Premier Access ability within Disney Plus and seeing how well that works. If anything, the big thing to take away from this Mulan situation, as I read in Julia Alexander's newsletter that she has about the Mouse Musings, this is a newsletter that she sends out. She pointed out that it's not about whether or not films can be successful outside of theaters. It's more of whether or not people are willing to pay a premium price for these bigger blockbusters, because if this is successful, you could see other projects like Black Widow or other projects that had to been delayed or going forward, maybe they can, if it's successful enough, how successful is it, and will that warrant maybe a complete shift to doing this type of release instead of doing a theatrical release? While there's plenty of people who say that's not the way that everything's going, that is the way everything has been going based off of the entire world situation that we're currently in. So I think a lot of eyeballs are going to be watching to see how successful Mulan is. And if it is, Disney is obviously going to brag about it and we'll have a better idea of how successful it is. But it is definitely one of those things that you should be keeping an eye on this weekend. We have nothing for Quibi. Jumping over to HBO Max, there is an LGBTQ plus docuseries called Equal that has set their cast and is moving forward at the service. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is the latest series to get an unscripted reunion special. We just talked about recently how The West Wing is getting one. Friends will eventually get one. This shows that HBO Max, they obviously like reunion specials. They work. They get eyeballs to the service in some way. Peacock has done this, with a couple of different shows. They've done stuff like that. So it makes sense that this type of content exists, but it'll be interesting to see what this ends up, if this becomes a regular normal amongst the services.
So this is a reunion. What about the, rumors that we've heard reported with some various levels of credibility about a actual Fresh Prince reboot?
Yeah, so that's real. For those of you who do not know, there was a trailer, a fan-made trailer called Bel-Air. And it was basically a fan of the original Fresh Prince series made this trailer in a situation where, what if the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was not a comedy, was not a sitcom, but instead was a drama about a boy who had to leave Philadelphia because of the social climate and moved to Bel-Air and had to endure the social differences that you experience from going to, from the urban areas of Philadelphia to the ritzy areas of Bel-Air. So the idea is that was the principle behind the trailer. It garnered a lot of attention. It ended up being seen by Will Smith. He really liked it. And clearly there's been a desire for a lot of content. There's a hunger amongst the streaming services for a variety of different content, but also that content that has that built-in nostalgic element. And that is one of these. This is one of them. So there is a series that has been currently in development. It was actually announced, I believe, about 2 weeks ago. And at the time when it was announced, it said it was being shopped around. There was no specific service that it was linked to, but they were in fact making it. Will Smith is connected to it. He's going to be a producer for the series, but the series itself is being shopped around. And they said that there was 2 companies that were extremely interested in it. Warner Media, obviously, because they distributed the original Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and that's why it's on HBO Max. And then NBC Universal, which is where the original Fresh Prince of Bel-Air series actually aired. So obviously we've got Peacock and HBO Max. So I'm actually wondering if this reunion special that HBO Max is doing is a way to actually gauge to see how much interest there is in this property, to see if there's enough people who actually would check out this series, and then that could in turn warrant them to go foot the bill for this series that is being currently shopped around. And that's my guess as to why this is being immediately announced right now. But fans of the series and fans of Will Smith who came to know him through the series, I'm sure they're going to check it out. But again, it's one of those things where HBO Max they are trying to come up with ways of making easy, quick content, and this is one of them.
I agree. This seems very much more of like almost a pilot, not a pilot, almost like a test of the market engagement. After these rumors have been released about a potential reboot of the Bel-Air story, there's been, it seems like, a little bit of a negative reception. So I'm curious to see how, because there's people at HBO Max at Warner Media who keep up with the stuff, who keep up with social media and sees a little bit of this negative reaction. And I'm curious if maybe that this is a way to, one, get garnership, to get views, to get new subscribers. Like, it's the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Like, everybody of a certain age, like, that's what they watched. It's very defining of the 90s. But I'm also curious to see if this is going to quell maybe the negative reactions of the rumors of maybe reboot and how it's going to go forward. I can actually see, understanding now what the trailer's supposed to be and what this darker, and when people say the words dark and gritty a little bit too much when they talk about, reboots or doing something in a different way, but a little bit of a darker tone, I would almost feel like it's almost tonally going to be more in line with maybe Atlanta, that's on FX type of a show, which I would definitely be interested in. But sometimes some shows don't even be brought back, and maybe that Warner Media realizes that although that they struck a gem in producing Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and that was a gem of a show, sometimes you can't strike gold twice, and that's probably what they're going to find out. Either they can or they can't with this reunion special.
All right, so then the last bit of HBO Max news, there was an article that popped up on Vulture, which I would strongly suggest everybody out there takes a look at. It talks about the HBO Max-acre, and one headline is really good, really great, but it basically talks about why the job cuts at Warner Media had to happen, why it makes perfect sense as to why they happened. There was a lot of really good quotes in here that are worth pointing out.
Yeah, definitely. One of them was It's if you read it's in bold black, and it's usually a good indicator that there's something good there. But the quote was that there were simply too many senior executives overseeing the distribution of content at the company, and too many trying to do the same thing. If we go back in time, maybe like 6 months ago, or even 3 months ago, you would have looked at the organizational chart at Warner Media, or even AT&T, but AT&T, Warner Media, just anything dealing with streaming or cable or producing content and getting that to an end user. If you look at the organizational chart, there are a lot of VPs, senior vice presidents, a lot of executives that kind of dealt with all the same things, and that's one, not just efficient as a business. Too many people doing the same thing, and it's not efficient with the way they're trying to go forward. But then also the fact that there was confusion in the HBO Max launch of like, do we do some of the talent agents? Do they go to HBO to pitch a project, or do they go to HBO Max? And totally, there was a little bit confusion there. Some of the executives kind of had hands in both worlds. Some of them didn't, and that was kind of all confusing. So it makes a lot of sense why this organizational change had to happen, either from a cultural reason of like, hey, we're moving away from the old business model, we're moving into a new business model, and so we're getting rid of kind of like a little bit of the old culture. A lot of people had redundant positions where they were very, very much overlapping, and that just wasn't needed for what HBO Max, Warner Media wanted to move for the future. Overall, this is a great article, and I really enjoyed it because I felt like it was very down the middle. It wasn't too pro or too against. It just kind of stated the facts of why some things are good, some things are bad, and that it pretty much painted an even picture of HBO Max, of like, it is a streaming service that's not failing, but it has a few hiccups. And with the Killar coming on and pushing his vision forward, of like, the whole point of Warner Media is at the end of the day to be streaming focused. So how does it affect the streaming business and getting content to the end viewers on the HBO Max platform? It's all about that. So overall, it was a great article. How'd you feel about it? I
really enjoyed the article. I mean, it points out a lot of things that honestly makes perfect sense. Why would they have executives why would they have executives from HBO and HBO Max trying to, like, why would they be being both pitched the same project, and then one of them ends up potentially outbidding the other for the project? I understand that HBO is, there's that level of prestige that comes with a series being on HBO. The streaming service is called HBO Max. So at the heart of that service is HBO content. So there shouldn't be a situation where you're trying to like compete against yourself for content in any way. And I think it makes sense to have one person overseeing all of the content that is coming in, instead of having multiple different people vying for this content for their respective platforms, whether it be broadcast with HBO or broadcast with some of the Turner stations, or whether it be the streaming service with HBO Max. It just doesn't make any sense. A lot of what's happened is consolidation, and we've talked at length about the other streaming services and how it makes sense for them to be consolidated. It feels like every week we're bringing up one of the streaming services that are underneath Warner Media's umbrella and saying it's only a matter of time before they get basically absorbed into HBO Max. But it's the truth, and it makes the most sense. It doesn't make any sense for someone to sit out there saying, no, we have no plans of getting rid of this service, or we have no plans of taking the content that's there and bringing it over to HBO Max. Why would you not? Why would you try to compete with other streaming services out there that are part of your same corporate umbrella? It just doesn't make any sense. But also, it hinders the larger streaming service in competing with the large players out there. HBO Max costs more than every other service out there. It's $15 a month. Even Netflix is the one exception if you get the super high tier. But when you compare it to the other services, even Hulu, CBS All Access, Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus, all these other services, they don't cost anywhere near as much. So you expect to have more content. And I think there's not a disagreement amongst the journalists out there and the people and the analysts who are sitting there saying HBO has a massive library. HBO Max has the potential of being super successful. I don't think there's any debate about that. I think the biggest debate is whether or not they do the right moves to make HBO Max the service that legitimately has the ability to compete with every service out there to the largest degree possible. And I think that's the biggest thing. All right, so then jumping over to Peacock, Joe Exotic series has gotten a series pickup at NBC Universal and will air on multiple platforms, including Peacock. And then there's a dystopian drone short film called Skywatch that is being adapted into a television series at Peacock as well. No niche streaming services, other streaming providers, not specifically streaming, but there is now rumors that AT&T is looking to sell DirecTV, and by all accounts, that makes perfect sense. There's been rumblings about this for quite some time, specifically before we've heard recently this new desire, I guess, within AT&T to sell off a lot of their assets that they can sell off to focus on other assets, because they do have some debt. Specifically, I believe it's like $150 billion of debt. A lot of that comes from the Warner Media acquisition that they had. The biggest thing is DirecTV has been a service that has been floundering for years. It's basically less than half of what it was bought for. So it makes sense for them to try to offload it. Every single quarter we hear about how their subscribers leaving DirecTV. There's more and more people leaving, and there's less and less people subscribing. It makes perfect sense. There's been rumblings over at Dish Network to potentially create a larger company by gaining DirecTV, but I think there's some antitrust issues with that. But overall, it makes perfect sense for AT&T to try to get rid of DirecTV for a couple of reasons. One, it's not profitable long term. AT&T, there's been some rumors that they were looking to sell DC Comics. I completely think those were baseless rumors that had no ground whatsoever. But then there was also rumors that they were looking to sell WB Games, which hypothetically it's possible. But the thing is, the dollar signs that they were saying that they wanted for it seemed low, considering the perspective, the potential of money that they could be making from video games is huge. Video games are hotter than ever, and if you've got enough video games that are producing, you can make a lot of profit on video games. It's just the nature of the business right now. So it doesn't make any sense to sell off a division that is, one, profitable, but also has the potential to be even more profitable as time progresses. DirecTV, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. They've got no potential to grow unless they completely, shift over to the satellite internet situation that we've been, that a lot of other companies have been getting in on, including Amazon, including Elon Musk's company. There's that potential, but they haven't shifted that focus. So it's not like they're already going to be behind everybody else who's already been working on that for a long period of time. It makes sense. It also is a company that is actually still has some sort of value to it. There's, that $20 billion price tag isn't something small. It's nowhere near the amount of money that some of these other divisions that they've talked about, that people have said they're talking about selling, even Crunchyroll for $1 billion, which, like I said, I think that was a little bit high. There is perspective that you could say any of the divisions are worth more than they are, or worth less than they say. But I honestly believe that DirecTV is something that they should offload as soon as possible, because it's just going to progressively get valued less and less and less as time progresses.
Yeah. I mean, I know how some people are making such a big deal about AT&T's debt, and look, like, they do have a lot of debt. It's not insignificant amount of debt, but the past couple of years after the the Great Recession, companies have been piling on more debt due to there being extremely low interest rates. Now, as the pandemic's been hit, and a lot more companies have taken out more loans because they've been either cheap because they need them, or they just took advantage of the fact that interest rates are now even lower, or lending rules have been eased so they can get more capital that way. So anyway, lots of companies have lots of corporate debt, and lots of companies also have the same amount or relative amount of debt for AT&T as AT&T does. I guess so. I don't understand this concept of why people are so focused on AT&T's debt. It's if we really were more concerned, we'd care about a lot of other companies that have even more debts. But even still, I love how people are trying to tie this down to, well, there's all this debt and they're trying to make the money back, and it's like, well, if you even look at it, okay, let's not look at where we are currently. Let's take a step back. DirecTV has been losing subscribers for years now. Every quarterly report we talk about with AT&T, we bring up DirecTV's numbers have just been lower and lower and lower. People are moving away from satellite cable. People are moving away from cable in general, but then also satellite cable. So it makes sense why they're trying to sell it off as they can. Like, yes, do they still have subscribers? Do they still have the paying users? Obviously, but is that good for AT&T's bottom line to invest in a company that's losing subscribers? No, it probably should go to a different company that is okay with the numbers that they have and trying to grow it even more, or try to utilize other parts of DirecTV. Like DirecTV, for me, the value is that it has gotten tons of experience with consumers accessing cable via satellites. Like, there's a big push with like Facebook, Amazon, there's always Google that's in the mix. Elon Musk has this new project with Tesla, Starlink, I think, that's to bring satellite internet to consumers. So I can see how DirecTV would have the experience in that area. Yeah, I don't see it's going to like another like broadband provider or a cable provider or something like that. It just doesn't fit within the AT&T business portfolio. And I think that this is probably a change that either Stinky or Killar has realized. It's like, hey, this doesn't fit within the Warner Media, banner of companies. It's supposed to be it just doesn't fit in that area. So sell it off. So once again, everything's about delivering content to the end user via like HBO Max. And so it's like, how do these certain sub companies fit within that pipeline of content? And DirecTV just doesn't. So it makes sense why they're getting rid of it. And yeah, you have, the NFL Sunday Ticket, which probably its only real, worthwhile investment part of it. Like, it's one thing that still keeps people on board, because I feel like without it, it's not people would jump to the service in a heartbeat. But it's just, let's calm down AT&T and their debt situation. This is a company that actually makes a lot of sense to sell, and they should have done a lot sooner, in my opinion. So the panic that I've been hearing about AT&T and about DirecTV and the debt and selling off different companies, I don't know. For me, I just want that to stop a little bit, because try to have a holistic picture of AT&T and where they've been over the years and where the market has been over the years. And you'll see why they have a lot of debt, and you'll see why selling DirecTV is actually a good business move. And it's not reactionary. It's not because of Killar's doing this Max-acre thing. It's just, it is business, is business sound. It just makes so much more sense.
There's an article that found on Variety from January of 2019 talking about how Hollywood's biggest media companies are, how they're avoiding getting crushed by debt. When you just look at media companies, which of course AT&T is considered one because they have Warner Media. AT&T does have more than everybody else out there. The closest one, even by comparison, is Comcast, but they still have roughly about $50 billion less of debt than AT&T. I know that there was a huge concern last year because it was drilled into quarterly reports and things like that for AT&T. There was a lot of focus on how the investors at AT&T were highly focused on the fact that Warner Media was a huge purchase and gave them an incredibly large amount of debt because of it. But they did it specifically because they realized the future of the business needs to be not only content delivery, but also content as a whole. And that's why they did it. Same reason why Comcast got into it by going after NBC Universal and then later on with Sky over in Europe. There's a reason why they did this. So the thing is, it's not surprising, and there are obviously other companies. Disney has their own fair share of debt, nowhere near as much, but they do have their fair share of debt, and they actually had to take out more debt earlier this year because of everything going on. AT&T, on the other hand, they don't have to worry about parks because Warner Brothers has no parks. They license their characters out to Six Flags and some other parks across the world, but in general, that's not something that they've had to really deal with. So it's still a game of content and content delivery. And I honestly, like I've said before, if it makes perfect sense to shut off something that's not making money. It doesn't make any sense to shut off something that's profitable or has at least the potential to be profitable, unless of course it doesn't fit within the larger model. Crunchyroll, in my opinion, makes sense to offload just because it could be successful somewhere else and it doesn't need it to be within the AT&T umbrella. But at the same time, like I said before, I don't think it's anywhere worth the amount of money that it was rumored to be valued. So there's that. So a couple of other discussion points. There is a new study from Nielsen that AVOD is outpacing SVOD. Now that means ad-supported video on demand compared to streaming video on demand. And all I have to say is, well, that's not that big of a surprise because let's be honest, AVOD is free. It's ad supported. So in most cases, you're going to see ad supported video on demand content, in public places where they can consistently run it over and over again. They don't have to worry about paying money to have that ability to have that content. You're going to see that stuff at hotels and bars and restaurants, places that have screens airing content constantly. And it's a heck of a lot cheaper to have that type of content compared to, paying a subscription for cable TV or something like that. Instead, all you need to have is an internet connection. You have to have the ability to stream it onto a TV. So it makes perfect sense. I've talked about this before. We've talked about this before in the past about how, a lot of the AVOD services like Tubi and Philo and Zumo, they were all making deals with larger companies, specifically hotels was a big one that we kept hearing about. And that's a real thing. And it makes perfect sense as to why that would happen because it's a lot cheaper for the companies who are, using those services rather than having to go find content elsewhere. And it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense of why AVOD would outpace SVOD. I mean, like you said, like free is, well, it's not really free, but for the consumer, it is free in terms of monetary value of why AVOD services would get more view time, more screen time than it would the SVOD services. What's nice about the AVOD is that you can, there are some like decent, pieces of content on there, but the reason why people like AVOD is that you can, I can see like airplanes using AVOD as some of their service to replace maybe their in-house, quote unquote cable service that they have channels. I can see like for hotels, and we know that a few hotels have used either Tubi or Pluto TV or something like that. They signed some deals with those AVOD services of having that as their base content piece instead of getting cable from either Charter or somebody a cable provider. So it just makes sense of why AVOD would be more than SVOD. So I don't think that people should read in that too much, but it's just another reason why it makes sense why AVOD is more than SVOD, and it's the reason why you have these companies being picky over these deals of why HBO Max and Amazon and Roku are still in a little bit of a battle to try to figure out the contracts because there is so many eyes on AVOD and there's so much potential revenue and trying to make sure that each side gets the best deal it can. So it makes a lot of sense. It shouldn't be surprising. It kind of confirms a lot of what I feel like people who care about the space really, some of their thoughts.
And in other news that would not be surprising to most people who at least listen to this podcast, there is another study that has put out the information that households are subscribing to multiple streaming services, not just one. I think there was this big idea at the beginning of, not the beginning, but the end of last year when Disney Plus was launching, Apple TV Plus was launching. There was a lot of people who were like, oh, is Disney Plus going to be the Netflix killer? Is this going to hinder Netflix? And as we've talked about multiple times on this show, Disney Plus has content, obviously has great numbers when it comes to subscribers, but ultimately it's not a replacement for Netflix. It doesn't offer a lot of high quality content that's geared towards adults. There is just, it's not there. So the thing is, Disney Plus, it serves a purpose. There's definitely people who have subscribed to it and have been subscribed to it since its launch, specifically because of the children's content it offers on a consistent basis. But it's definitely not a replacement for Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a replacement for Netflix. I mean, I feel like this article just sums up the idea that there is no like saturation yet in terms of streaming. There were some concerns by some people who were worried about market saturation in the streaming space, that there are too many players and not enough people would pay for them, that SVOD would eventually plateau and die off, and that they're going to do something else. So it seems that that's not the case, that consumers are willing to pay for multiple, subscriptions of the streaming platforms that they like. And I think this is a good trend, because I feel that I personally am a fan of like no ads. They're monetizing our time and attention, and we're not getting anything from that, not a substantial amount of anything from that. So I'm not the biggest fan of ads, and I'm a big fan of like subscription-based content, because they can really deliver what's important to you and not necessarily making sure that it is clickable and likable and viral enough to be spread and to get those advertising dollars. You don't have to be ruled by advertisers. You can create the content that you want. So that's why I'm a big fan of subscription content. And it makes, it affirms that subscription has got a way to go, that people aren't tired of it, that there's still more players in the space that you can add, and that the pie is going to get bigger. So this is great. It's great news for everybody who likes streaming. And it's great news for the new players like HBO Max and Peacock and, CBS All Access, when they redo and do the Paramount CBS All Access thing going on. They're not into a market that is pretty much hit its limit, that people still want good content and they will pay multiple different places for it. So this is really exciting.
All right. And with all of that being said, that is all of the news we have from the past weekend. Discussion points. There are a little bit of trailers, not as many as the last couple of weeks, but there is some trailers you can take a look at within the show notes. The show notes can be found at thestreamingwars.io. You can also follow us on Twitter and join our Discord for the latest articles that we talk about here on the podcast and some that we don't. You can follow us on Instagram for all the latest announcements related to new podcasts releasing. In addition to that, you can send us an email at thestreamingwars@gmail.com with any questions, comments, concerns, or topics you'd like us to discuss on the future episode. And wherever you're listening to this podcast, we greatly appreciate any feedback that you can leave for us. With all that being said, for Tony and myself, this has been The Streaming Wars, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to The Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.